Interesting and perhaps depressing news to emerge from Press Engine, which, and I'll just quote the Video Games Chronicle news story here, is a popular PR tool used by developers and publishers to distribute codes and press releases to a global database of journalists and content creators. Again, quoting VGC, according to Press Engine, more than 600 journalists who regularly covered video games at major outlets around the world have disappeared from their database in the last 12 months. And the same number happened 12 months before that. And if you factor in freelancers and part-timers, then that actually increases to 4,000 people who have left games media since October 2023. According to, again, the Press Engine stuff, tier one publications that cover games, the global pool of game journalists declined 25% in 2 years. And the vast majority of these departures were from specialist game sites like IGN, Polygon, or GameSpot. Obviously, contraction in the business isn't great news. At the same time, though, there was a massive expansion during COVID. And, along with the industry itself, things have contracted since then. It's very depressing to see so many people just exit this area of the market, our area of the market. But at the same time, from my experience working with, these major, huge websites, the philosophy that drives them is ultimately that they are answerable to shareholders, and those shareholders demand their revenues and their profits, right? So that's kind of why this is happening, and it's also one of the reasons why I wanted to take Digital Foundry away from that, because ultimately, if the video games industry is contracting, there's fewer games, then that's going to have a knock-on effect on what we do, which we cannot predict. Therefore, we can sort of mitigate to remain profitable, but I'm not going to be setting, revenue or profit demands on the team, because we're entirely beholden to what's happening in an industry we don't control. And we're also publishing on YouTube, which is a platform over which we have no control whatsoever. So, that's kind of like why I wanted to go independent, simply because certain expectations which larger companies have, just aren't really a good fit for a small team like us. But John, I'm curious what you make about all of this. It is depressing reading, really, but kind of understandable, I guess.
Yeah, I do think it's understandable, especially having seen what it's like on the inside of those bigger companies. I think it's a confluence of factors. Firstly, I think just the nature of the way people consume media has changed. There's less interest in the written word, unfortunately. And the whole pivot to video thing really happened. People do like videos. But even there, you have a sizable enough audience that enjoys longer form content, but the way people consume stuff these days is largely like social media driven and soundbite driven, like short little clippets, TikTok style videos, as well as like social media posts. Like the large numbers consume that kind of thing, right? And that's kind of hard to target. In addition, of course, we have the whole AI stuff coming in. So like we're reaching a point where the types of like money making things like guides, for instance, and some of the other like basic things people might write about, AI can either do it or like field the queries essentially
Yeah.
for people. Although obviously if there's less of that stuff actually being written, then the AI has less stuff to pull from. And it is funny because like sometimes if I'm working on an embargoed game or something, I just like pull up, dabble around in AI just to see like, all right, so what does the AI know about this game versus what I've just learned? And the answer is nothing. Like it just writes very confident sounding stuff that has no basis on anything, right? Because it can't possibly know. It doesn't, that information is not available for the AI to have scraped. So it can't do it. But there's a lot of things that it can do, and that's also an issue. In addition, the upper management of these bigger outlets, especially, like they want growth, often unreasonable. They don't really care about the subject at hand. They're just trying to follow trends and make the money where they can with those trends. and the type of work that a lot of these people were doing just doesn't really fit into that anymore. And so it is getting small. But I feel like we've been this type of industry has had its ups and downs over the years, of course. I mean, Rich remembers the magazine days well,
Mm,
and obviously people writing about games would have been much, much, much less during that period versus when the internet exploded. So it's like you get this rise and fall, and the ones that kind of stick around are those that people find worth listening to or interesting to listen to. And I think we've seen, when you look at the people who are left, a lot of it is like this nice confluence of deep knowledge on a topic combined with the willingness to share their opinions, right? That's something we do for sure. But you look at like Jeff Gersman, for instance. He's been around just almost as long as Rich. He's still doing it. And he's established that thing. I mean, that's what Giant Bomb was originally built on back in the day, was this like, we have opinions, sometimes they're strong, but we also have a ton of knowledge about this stuff. And a lot of the and that's also true with YouTubers these days. It's usually the knowledgeable YouTubers that are fun to listen to and share opinions that people kind of enjoy, whether they agree with them or not. They like to listen to it. And
Hmm.
so when you have a large staff of writers like looking for news and writing articles, like none of that personality comes through.
right.
And people just don't enjoy that as much anymore. And so, but it also means that we lose out on a lot of big story stuff and like behind the scenes features and other types of fun content. Like I look back at the old days of Eurogamer, and there was just a lot of awesome stuff to read on there all the time. And it's just that stuff isn't profitable anymore. So if you're under a big company umbrella, I mean, who's going to fund that, right?
Mm,
So for us going independent, being able to do like say a retro podcast, we know that it has the potential to work. People have done it, but like you tell that to management, like, oh yeah, we want to talk about old games. It's like this four old dudes talking about old games sitting around every week. Like they're like, what are you talking about? Like, that's stupid. Don't do that. We got Fortnite over here, whatever. They don't want that. They have no interest in it at all. Even if there's a potential to make money, like it needs to be growing right now, and they don't see growth in old stuff. They don't care about a niche audience as much, is the feeling I get from them. So
Mm.
right.
that's just kind of my thoughts on the situation as it stands.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm just to piggy. John said everything that I fully agree with. But also, I just want to add in like the Forever games change a
Oh,
little bit.
forgot that.
The dynamic of like what news is news now, and a lot of these children to young adults, they were socialized in games like Fortnite or Roblox or
Oh yeah.
Minecraft, where they have their own like little spheres of knowledge and
Hmm.
boards and Discord groups, very dissociated, and then a lot of news that occurs in the game itself. And if you're only plugged into those ecosystems of these, very specific games and only really caring about them, you don't care about the wider industry at large and maybe about the conditions or the behind the scenes or reviews in adjacent genre. Like you just don't care about those things. So that's like an entire audience that these sites no longer have access to, and maybe we don't even have access to as independents, because it's so niche or it's so different than what we do.
Not niche,
So
it's
that's
the
like,
opposite, but like
yeah, it's the opposite. It's
we're
so
the
big.
niche.
Yeah, we're the niche. But like, this is like, if that is where a lot of the money is going to have to go due to just demographics, then the traditional model, it makes sense that it would shed labor at that point, even if it's awful. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, we're going to be launching a website. Great time to do it, right? Based on what we're seeing
The
here.
best.
But ultimately, what we want to do is to take the work that we do and get it to as many people as possible. And that means embracing different forms of media. And a website is pretty crucial to that, in my opinion. So although we're doing it on an extremely limited scale, we are actually expanding at the moment, which is really exciting.
I think so. That's something I love about you, Rich, is like you've always had this drive to like do stuff that's cool or interesting. And that seems to like you're trying to find ways to make sure that it's like feasible, like that we're
Right.
not going to like be shedding money, but you're always interested most in finding those types of things. It's like, well, this is something that people will enjoy, so we should pursue this and find a way to make it work.
Right.
As opposed to like, that'll make money, but not enough money. I've never heard you say that before.
Right. Okay. I mean, we do like to make money.
We love to make money. We need to survive,
Yes.
but like you're not driven 100% by profits.
Yeah,
above
absolutely.
all,
Yeah.
because that doesn't work.
I mean, when
from
we
this space.
originally sort of set up with Eurogamer, there was a shared philosophy, and it was kind of like summed up by just a simple phrase: "Wouldn't it be cool if? Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Wouldn't it be cool if we did that?" And by experimenting, you actually find what works and what doesn't, and you refine what you do. Right. So when it comes to the website, there's certain things which I think are going to happen and are happening at the moment, which is that I don't see that there's any actual point doing SEO-driven headlines or adjusting your copy to be SEO friendly, because so many people out there are doing it that you're never going to be able to beat the experts, so to speak. And secondly, AI is coming along, which is going to kill off the whole thing anyway. And so, ultimately, it's about doing good articles that people share. That's yes, kind of going old school in a way. It's stuff like, okay, we find this interesting. We've made some content about it. We're going to deploy it as a video. We're going to make a website article out of it. Maybe at some point we'll do clips or even reels. But the point is that wouldn't it be cool if that's kind of what we're embracing here.
I think you're absolutely right, Rich, and that's the big thing. Is like we found that there's an audience of people that love watching Digital Foundry that want to watch the whole videos. But there's also bits of info and things that we talk about that some people find really cool, but they don't want to watch the whole thing. But that doesn't mean they're not interested in that bit of info. And that's sort of like tapping into that whole like 30-second video clip thing, or like, small form social media posts, basically finding ways to like get stuff that's potentially cool to people out there while still producing the stuff that, is appealing to those that us old heads, I guess, that like the full thing.
Yeah, I think the other thing, of course, is that you've got your sites like IGN and GameSpot, all of those sites, which the scope of those sites is so huge that obviously they're far more impacted by trends within the industry. What I like to say is, I mean, we always have a bit of a downturn in the summer, but what I always like to say is that our audience isn't actually going anywhere.
Right.
So if there's not good new games to talk about or new technologies to talk about, that's not really a problem, because the amount of stories out there doesn't actually reduce. We just pivot to doing stuff like retro, for example, and choose the right retro topic, and it's actually more valuable to us as a business than like a review of the latest AAA game that nobody will be talking about in 2 months. So there's different ways to remain viable and interesting as a business. Ultimately, that's what it's all about: is being interesting. And at the same time, I think the other thing is that it's really difficult to build authority as a brand if you're like one of these massive websites, because you've got to serve everyone. So where do you become an expert in a particular thing that somebody might be interested in? Right. So I actually think that, over the course of time, and I actually think it's happening now, but especially on YouTube, is that the concept of a big entity controlling all information is falling away towards individuals or small teams that are specialists in their niches. And that's where we sit exactly, right? So, and to a certain extent, you sort of cross your fingers here, but I also think that's the approach that's going to be the most AI proof in terms of viability as a business. So, yeah, I think it's just, the thing about the games business is it's hugely dynamic. Anything can happen at any point, which is another reason why it's really difficult to do things like, okay, I'm going to do a business plan for the next 5 years, because you just don't know what's going to be happening next month, let alone 5 years from now. So you do need that certain level of flexibility. And I do think that smaller teams can be more agile as well and can make changes more quickly. I mean, the stuff that we've got coming up since the 3 months that we went independent is stuff that, we've kind of been wanting to do for a very long time, but for various reasons we weren't able to. And yet within 3 months we were able to do it ourselves. And that's because, ultimately we're now answerable to ourselves. So, yeah, I think that's kind of like we're in this sort of transition point in the industry. And I think will impact anybody connected to that industry. And that includes journalists.